the other thing is it makes it consistent so that you can put consistent data into your CRM and use that very effectively to manage the interactions that happen between each face-to-face visit. So you can see these, they have to do it really well on the phone, they have to do it really well face-to-face, and finally, they need to, in some cases for the higher level ones, they need to quickly, they need to look at the stand-up presentation piece. And very much like a wholesaler, it needs to be clear, it needs to be polished, and it needs to be engaging.
Yeah, not every model includes presentation skills, right, Marianne? Some people are in channels or in businesses where they don't do the stand-up in the hybrid model.
Yeah, and again, this is a more advanced skill, and right now the presentations that are being made are not necessarily product related, and they will have a lot to do with sometimes selling the hybrid role to a branch in particular to get them up to speed on that, or the other thing is a value add in front of an advisor's clients. Mm-hmm. So you're juggling a few things here and a lot of different skills. And so one of the key guidelines that we'll leave you with is that if you can close it without being there, you'll be more successful. And close when and why, choose when and why you visit thoughtfully, and don't assume which is out there, that the bigger the deal, the more important it is to show up. So that being said, Claudia, do you want to talk a little bit about some guidelines around the webcasting?
I do. Thank you. We had talked about webcasting and the need to have webcasting skills. I do want to start with what I think is a very important comment about webcasting, which is that we obviously believe it's a very powerful tool, and we think it's great when hybrids have this, as well as internals and by the way externals as well. Actually, we think it's really begun to move in a very positive direction right now. But I do have to say to you that we don't think of webcasting as definitional. I think there's still some people holding on to the concept of the e-wholesaler, who was the person who did webcasts. And it's entirely possible not to use webcasting in your model, to use other web applications and email. But having said that, I think it's also one thing we discovered that there seemed to be some confusion on, is that there are really two kinds of webcasting that you need to be aware of. One is a webinar, which is what we're doing now, although hopefully without an echo and without slides disappearing from the screen.
No, Claudia, you don't understand. All that glitch stuff, and our audience knows this, was done deliberately
to keep them engaged.
They could get a feel for what a hybrid really needs to do. Yeah. It's difficult.
It is hard. But anyway, the webinar is really like a stand-up presentation. It's formal, you work from slides, very often PowerPoint, you schedule it, got a lot of place in this world, but it is not, we don't think, as impactful as what we're going to call the web meeting. And a web meeting, you see that on the right of the screen, is actually comes from desktop sharing. It's being used more and more, and it allows the hybrid wholesaler in real time to speak with the advisor just like they're meeting across the desk, except of course that the desk is virtual and it's on the computer, and they can have out on their desktop whatever it is they want to talk to them about. They can show them a piece of marketing literature. They can open their website. They can take them to that day on the New York Times headline or the Wall Street Journal headline. Whatever it is that helps them converse. And as I said, in that way, it's really like a face-to-face meeting. We're selling across the desk.
There was recently a study that was published too in terms of the impact of information that you do have on your website, and if it is, in quotes, handed to the advisor, they're much more likely to use it, much more likely to act on it. And this is a way to actually make that happen without the hand. Mm-hmm. But Claudia, you did not talk about the downside of this.
Well, I wasn't thinking of it as a downside, because there is another piece that's very important, is this kind of webcasting A web meeting allows them, participants, the people who are in it, on a very casual basis to actually see the hybrid wholesaler. Is that what you're referring to?
I'm referring to what they're wearing.
What they're wearing. I mean, then they need to look like a wholesaler, but we've met some hybrids who do this really well. And they look sharp and they look good. And does it replace the face-to-face meeting? The answer is no. But does it fill in that gap so they now know who this person looks like and know the person looks credible? It's great. I don't think I mentioned that you can do this right in the middle of a phone conversation. You'd be talking to an advisor. You say, hang on, let me send you something. You send them a link in an email. They click on it, and they're in a conversation with you. Again, I could go overboard on this, but bottom line, if your mind about webcasting is still stuck in the formal webinar, I would ask you to pull it out and also include this web meeting category. And as Marianne and I have ably demonstrated, there's a lot of skill required to be able to do this with these. Not only technology, but sales skills.
One of the last things to talk about. What you have here is a wrap-up that being a hybrid wholesaler is truly a balancing act.
It's truly a balancing act. You need to be able to do phone, travel, understand your technology. I think we do need to say that promoting a person to hybrid who is not willing to embrace technology is a problem. But it's a real balancing act. And it really requires that the hybrid have a breadth of skill that, frankly, no other member of the distribution team has. And in addition to that, I think it's very important to note that generally speaking, you probably don't have a single member of your management team who's able to coach all of this. If you think about it as a person who needs to be phone, field, technology, everything all together. It's you've got it there, but do you have it in one person? Probably not. And then, so that's the balancing act. And then I just want to discuss for one moment the incredible malady of hybrid creep. A hybrid creep is when a hybrid starts to spend more and more time in the field and less time on the phone. And the two pieces of this, in other words, when they start to act more and more like a wholesaler and less like a hybrid, and they lose their balance. The behavior trains the advisor to think of themselves, to not really value the hybrid model. I mean, if the hybrid shows up every 6 weeks, the advisor begins to think of them as a wholesaler and wonders why anyone would want to have a phone interaction with them. So it's on both sides. The hybrid creep is the disease that undermines your model. And so we wanted to mention that. And having the fun part, which is talking about hybrid creep, in terms of the questions we asked in advance about what were people interested in, this was huge, the measurement. How do you measure hybrid success?
And so I'm going to just talk for a minute about that. And I'm going to suggest that hybrids should, first of all, participate in how they are going to be measured. There's no measure that is perfect, but the more you get them involved in what makes sense, given the model. And the reason that I say that now in particular is because, surprise, surprise, there is an atmosphere of fear that is out there in the business. People are concerned about their jobs, and that's a legitimate fear. And what that means is that they are looking for structure. They're looking for even more direction, so they know when they're doing a good job. So that's why I'm suggesting that if you get them involved in it, it will be helpful. But the key points in terms of measuring is that hybrids need to be accountable and tracked for their own production. It can't get sort of lost into the territory. And that's not an easy thing to do necessarily. Activities also need to have a specific quality definition with daily goals. So, for example, if you look at, what a face-to-face visit, for example, what has to happen for it to count as a quality visit besides showing up? Is there specific information that needs to happen there, need to be gathered? Really the parts of the sales process. So that's what we're talking about in terms of quality measures. And one of the interesting things is that we see happening all the time, which is counterproductive, is that you want to be very careful of measuring activities alone. And what that means is, for example, if you want to, firms are out there and they're tracking how many web meetings they're having as opposed to what happens on those web meetings.